You're trying to control the thinking process logically. That's why you get stuck.
We don't tend to actually pay enough attention to what is it genuinely that matters most to us.
Unless it hits us in the face and then we realize, ooh, I really valued that other side.
One thing that we're actually lacking in being conscious about. Access for people that would not normally have access to you. That's what actually changes the world.
Wish I had thought more toward intuition.
Often we see incredible young people actually rising to the top, but so often they're being told, wait your turn.
Your heart knows more about who you are, what you need to be doing than anybody else.
This is Let's Pay Attention, Hacking Consciousness. I'm Kathy DeMarcos. Let's explore what it means to lead, live, and listen with intention.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Let's Pay Attention, Hacking Consciousness. This is going to be an incredible session, and let me tell you why, because our next guest is extraordinary, and that's probably an understatement. So please let me introduce you to Mary Kurek. Mary is actually the president. She's actually the CEO of Frontrunners Development, Incorporated. She actually launched her career at 19 as the youngest member of the North Carolina governor's staff, earning the prestigious Longleaf Pine Award for her service. She went on to support international diplomacy through the US government and global exchange programs focused on cross-cultural relations. Her 8-year tenure as Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce, adjacent to the world's largest Marine Corps air station, earned her commendation from the Commanding General of MCAS Cherry Point. She's a graduate of the US Chamber Institute for Organization Management. And in 2007, Mary authored a networking book endorsed by the American Businesswomen's Association, laying the foundations for her pivot into social entrepreneurship, my passion. Today, she leads Frontrunners Development, a business development agency advancing impact through strategic partnerships with global innovators, government leaders, and solution providers across 75 plus countries. The agency supports UN SDG goals and powers the first impact-focused business networking media platform, viewed in over 160 countries annually. Mary has conducted more than 700 interviews with international change makers and facilitates large-scale collaborations through Frontrunners' curated innovation network. Frontrunners Development maintains global partnerships with education, healthcare, and economic-focused organisations around the world. Through these partnerships, the development work, founders are actually getting their innovations commercialised, energy and sustainable village projects and gaining momentum where needed. And trade deals are actually opening up the doors for prosperity. Appointed to the North Carolina government's Advisory Council on Aging in 2022, Mary served 2 years and also founded 2 nonprofits. She serves on international boards such as Advancing Girls Education, which is AGE, Africa out of Malawi, and she's also the Sub-Saharan Open University. She sits on the board there. She has actually been reappointed to serve as an economic development team, part of the economic development team for 2026 by the Prince of Madagascar. And she is an active Rotarian. Now, don't you love her already? Because I do. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. It sounded like an ad. I love that.
Well,
That's great.
do you know, I think one of the things particularly for women is that we don't tend to actually share the whole of us. And I think that it was really important to actually really highlight not only the depth of who you are, but also the breadth of what you actually bring to every single table.
I always say there's a thread that runs through your life that kind of shows where you've come from and where you're headed or where you are now. And sometimes it's neat to be reminded of that thread. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know, the biggest privilege I think I have is that I can actually call you a friend. And it's interesting, the way our paths cross. But, part of, I guess, the reasons for these podcasts is to actually highlight then when we come together with people with the right intention and there is alignment, particularly in values, that connection becomes so deep so quickly.
I agree. And when the hearts align and the minds are, connected right away. And yeah, definitely that happened with us for sure. And then, a lot of the people that we've brought to each other, same thing. It's like we could see it right away.
Yeah.
The spirits are there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Mary, I guess, the theme of today's podcast is also actually just looking at our actual life journeys and yours in particular and, how you came to perhaps actually be so aligned, with what your actual purpose is. Coming through the trajectory that you have, it certainly has given you opportunity to cross paths with certain people, but make different choices. So where do you think there has actually been a pinnacle point?
A pivotal point? First one was when I was 19. And I thought about that a lot because the man who gave me the first opportunity in my life to see the world in a different way and to see the opportunity in front of me to be able to see what I could do or bring capability to whatever skills I had then, it passed away over the holiday. And he was well into his 80s, and it was the former governor of the state of North Carolina. And at the time that I met him, he was lieutenant governor, and I was serving as a page. And, that was, it was the last day of serving as a page. And I did what my mother told me to do, which was to bring a little something from our county as a thank you gift. It was like a paperweight or something. And I took it to his office and gave it to his secretary and had a little thank you note for allowing me to serve. And on that last day, he called me up by name. Too. He put his hand over the microphone and called me up by name. And I scared out of my wits. Little country girl, and he said, "How old are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm 18. He said, "Have you graduated high school?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "You did something no one else has ever done." And I said, "Oh my God." And he said, "You thanked me." He thanked me for serving. And he said, "I'm going to run for governor and I want you to work for me." I'm like,
wow.
So I did. And so that changed the trajectory, I guess, of my life because I actually was coming up to Raleigh. I lived 3.5 hours away, was raised 3.5 hours away, but I was coming up to Raleigh to go to business school. And so I did work on his campaign. He won. He not only won once, he was the first governor in our state to succeed himself. And so I was able to work for him again, end up working for his wife for a short period of time. So, so all along, he was like a mentor. He was my first boss. So during the holiday time when he did pass away, gave me some thinking time about all of that. So yeah, that was definitely the first pivotal moment. And it gave me an opportunity to see not just politics, but diplomacy.
Yeah.
And to be able to meet people that were decision makers and leaders and feel comfortable around them, and actually gave me a way of feeling like when it was my turn to step up into leadership's shoes as in economic development and leading my community as a Chamber of Commerce leader and that sort of thing and serving on global boards and whatnot, it gave me the confidence and the feeling that I could certainly do that with some, a head on my shoulders, so to speak.
Gosh, do you know, Mary, you speak about it so casually, and there's two sides that I actually, look at in hearing you share that story. And I've known you and I didn't really understand, that part of you. But he actually saw you, for who you were. And that actually says a lot, particularly in our current environment. So often we see incredible young people actually rising to the top, but so often they're being told, wait your turn.
Yeah, don't have a voice.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's beyond incredible when you see some of the revelations I've been having over the last few weeks. We talked about that right before we came on camera, because it's that story and my story and the fact that his passing away brought all that to the surface along with spending some time with a young gal that I've known since she was 13 and have been sort of mentoring for a while, that brought things to light about how that's very much not just part of my mission, it's integrated into everything I've always done.
Yes.
It literally has been and always is, and it's not programmatic with me. I always thought it was. I always tried to put it in a box, but it's not. It's integrated into everything. It is actually a focus. It's a focal point. It's not even, here's a program and it's very charitable and it's very impactful. And here's what else Mary does for business. It is all, it's like this.
Do you know, I think if I was to actually say to you, even a week ago, Mary, what would you actually say, constantly shows up consciously in your life? That probably wouldn't have come to top of mind.
No. It would not have, because it's not in my business brain. It was never in my business brain. That's what I've always done as part of my give back sort of charitable brain, and I had it separated. Yeah. I had it all separated out and categorized in my, I guess.
So there's two things that actually come from that. One is that what you're doing is beginning to genuinely understand what your values are and what they have been, but not actually keeping them separate, actually, almost enveloping that into what you do. That's the realization.
And I didn't even know where it came from my story until he passed away, and I started thinking about it. Oh my God, what I'm doing is what my story was. It's what my own story was.
Do you know how valuable that actually is? In some of the work that I do, Mary, and you and I have had, a few discussions along this, it is actually to start to bring people back so that they can remember who they are, remember who they've chosen to be. And at the core of that is actually our values. And you've encapsulated that in just sharing, what you just did so powerfully, right?
It's crazy.
I know, but this is actually, when I look at this year, 2026, last year I looked at it as we came towards the end and went, it's actually going to be a rapid year, but we can only solidify it if we actually dare to slow down. And the slowing down process is actually about us becoming more aware and more conscious, about what is it that we're actually choosing, to do, to become. We can't really bring that clarity until we slow down. And that was what you had the benefit of doing, over the last few weeks, slowing down and actually shifting where your thought process normally would be.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So if I was to say to you, given what you've been able to reflect upon, if you're thinking about consciousness and how that actually plays out in our personal lives and in leadership, what would you actually suggest to people that is an opportunity that they can take to really bring that sense of self to a hyper state?
I think it's interesting when I was thinking about this, and I've realized this has happened to me a couple of times lately. I consciously try to see a different perspective, paradigm shift, flip it. What if? Play that what if.
Yeah.
What if I looked at this differently? Because when I get stuck, but I know that I'm on the right track somehow, I'm on the right track, but there's something missing. There's a piece missing. It's not right. What is it? And it's not coming. Then I realize it's just the way that I'm looking at it. It's just the way that I'm thinking about it. And I get stubborn about it, and I keep thinking, okay, I need an anvil drop. Come on, God, drop that anvil, because I'm being dense about something. And I think the way it is, I'm a journal person. I like to journal things out. And once I start journaling things out, then things start to surface. And even if it's just words on a page, so I'll just start putting words on a page, and I start to go, oh, okay, move this around, change this. And I'm going, oh my gosh, I have it completely backwards. It's not that I'm doing this and this is attached. It's that I'm doing this and that is attached. That's how this is working. So I think that, sometimes it's a perspective shift. and really kind of making yourself looking at things a little bit differently.
Mm.
And I think sometimes you just have to get quiet and clear, and maybe however you do it. Like I say, I am a writer and I like to journal
Yeah.
and to do work. So taking the opportunity to really sit still, like you say, getting quiet, taking purposeful time to, if that's what you were asking me, is just to kind of be still with it. I'm kind of a type A a little bit, so I was forced into it. And sometimes that happens, when you're not still enough. God has a way of kind of making sure you sit still long enough to get what he's trying to have you do. But I'm fortunate. I live on an island, so I have the beach. So I can walk on the beach, and there's just nothing to me more cleansing and more clarifying than to look out over the water. And I sit down at the end of my little walk, and there's a little bench there, and I'll just kind of look out over the water and try to clear my head and just let things kind of fall into my head.
You just actually identified another point of differentiation, and when we don't slow down to think about it or actually reflect, I'm going to choose my words differently. There's such a significant difference between thinking and thought. And when you actually said, I just, allow words just to, fall and write, that's thought. But when we are thinking, the default is that we go back into what we already know, because thinking is actually the neural pathways that already exist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that is the luxury of what thought does. In your case, journaling, walking along the water, allowing that flow of energy to actually come through, which then actually ends up being, those random thoughts that you then just write down.
Trying not to think it through, because you're exactly right. It's you're trying to control the thinking process logically, and that's, if you do that, you're going to go to the same place you always have gone to.
Exactly.
The same answer,
and
that's why you get stuck.
Exactly, and yet we keep doing it. Mary, what do you think, values actually do in respect to playing the role of how we actually operate more consciously and more aware? Do we really recognize the impact of values?
Oh, I think sometimes you do when you get close enough to it. I feel like, and this sounds really funny, but just because I was during the holidays, when I'm sitting across from the family and we're all having dinner together, or we're watching TV together, and stupid little moments where everybody's giggling over something or laughing, the dog's on the laps of everybody, we're just looking at each other, and I'm thinking, this is one of those value moments, right? I can look at it and I go, I want to remember this because this I value. But so I'm close to it, and I can value that. If 3 weeks go by, I'm probably not thinking about that right at that point in time. But, when you're talking about your own values in terms of, when you're talking about conscious leadership, that kind of thing, honestly, I'm not sure how close you have to be to it before it hits you. I think a lot of times we're on these retreats or we're in these situations where we're forced to have to think about it. I just came out of a vestry retreat for our church. We all had to think about why. And I think it was very corporate. It was like, we're thinking about, why are we doing what we're doing for the church? And I was like, well, isn't that interesting? I never thought of us having to deal with a why for church work. We all kind of know why we're here, I thought. But where it was that kind of environment, well, then we're forced to think about that. So we're basically very values driven type of stuff. So until we're in those situations, I don't know how close we get to it, or unless it hits us in the face when we hurt, when it's us, we're scared.
Yeah.
When all of a sudden the opposite happens, and then we realize, ooh, I really valued that other side, the other thing that I really wanted to happen. Then I think that maybe sometimes we don't think about it as much. I could be wrong on that. That's me.
No, I think I tend to agree. When I reflect on you looking at public figures and, they have those pinnacle moments, it's usually because they've hit a crisis, and so that's what's actually shared in what they actually, speak publicly about. This happened and this made me realize, which comes back to a moment where they realize what they value more than what they were pursuing, and so I think you're spot on. We don't tend to actually pay enough attention to what is it genuinely that matters most to us, because we
don't talk about it enough.
Exactly.
We don't put it out there.
And it is just as important in business as it is in our personal lives. And yet we underplay, the importance of it. So if I was to actually ask you then, how do we then actually look at success? What is it that you would typically say to perhaps how you now begin to understand that, and you are a conscious leader, you operate differently? So how does success then actually play out in, what you do?
This is so good. I was actually thinking about this earlier. And I don't know that it was the thinking side of me that was thinking, but I was journaling early this morning. I got up about 5 this morning before everybody and even the dogs got up. I was journaling. And I kept thinking, is it the masses that I need to get to? Is it how big is the impact that I need to make? And it occurred to me that the youth or the young people that I had been working with already had their feet on the path, I think, to some form of leadership. I don't know that was necessarily purposeful on my part. I mean, I've developed a couple of leadership programs, youth leadership programs in my past. I've done a lot of mentoring for the most part. They're youth. And when I say youth, they're not necessarily 12-year-olds or 16-year-olds. They're on up to their 30s. But I'd say they have something on the ball. They're either young entrepreneurs or they've started nonprofits, or they're definitely, you can see the leadership path in front of them, and they all have good arts, and, they're on their own spiritual path too. I think that in what I came to in my mind, and from the standpoint of success, and that's the way I look at it now, is I'm not meant to necessarily hit the masses myself. I think my mandate, if you will, or my mission, my focus is to help those that can help the masses, that have their capability or already have the capability or have their own mandate or mission in front of them to create opportunities or open doors for others. And so I think that that's kind of my role, is that what my role is in life, if I manage to mentor or help or assist or boost a dozen this year or whatever that are going to go on and then impact a whole bunch more than that, then that's success to me. And I think that, very definitely when I, look at a list of maybe a dozen to 15, I think I had a list of 15. I just went ahead and wrote down some list of names just so I could say, these are people that I know that have been connected with me over the last, 6 months, and maybe some of them very recently that I know needed something from me. Either it was a letter for a fellowship they're trying to get, or, next level of education they want to reach, or, something that I could, connection that I could make for them or something like that. Then, I look at that and I go, yeah. I mean, if I can take that few minutes out, speak to their group, because I had one on Christmas Eve day that wanted me to speak to her group. I was like, you do realize that's Christmas Eve day? I was like, okay, here I go.
Yeah.
But, how can I turn it down? Because it's my mandate for some reason. I'm compelled. So, but if it helps that person reach the many that she's supposed to reach, then I've done my job. Then I've fulfilled my mandate. And that's success to me. So that day, that was successful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no. See, what I actually hear in that is that it is done with intention. And that then actually makes such a big difference. It's not just done casually. There's thought and consideration in what it is that you're doing. And now that you're even more aware, you have almost created this finite perspective of, part of your pathway, then you are being a lot more intentional. You are up at 5 a.m. You're actually curating that list. Right?
I couldn't help it. It was going to happen.
Do you know that as I actually was listening to you, what you've done is you've given access. And I think that's the one thing that we are actually lacking in being conscious about. access for people that would not normally have access to you, or that they don't have access to the people that they need to have access to. And that makes such a big difference. That's what actually changes the world. That's what makes, generational change possible. And you may actually see it as 15 people, but that's what I call the ripple effect, Mary. When you are commissioned to actually work with 15 people, and then you actually bring light to them and the possibilities that they have through you giving agency to them to do what they are wanting to do, then that's the ripple effect. And when we have those discussions, then it's at top of mind. It changes the intention in where, the way we do things.
I like the words that you use. Those are so much better. I like the words agency. And I think that covers a multitude of things for them. And I think it's so much better than thinking in terms of development and that sort of thing. I think that's what it's all about. Yeah.
So I'm going to tap into something else that I know you and I have often talked about, and that is intuition. My belief is that we all have the ability to be intuitive, but over time we have suppressed that. And I think that also then leads into our ability to be more conscious and aware of the choices that we make. What are your thoughts around that, and, how we can actually integrate that into the way that we do business?
I think we need to listen to it more. I absolutely believe in intuition and wish I had thought more toward intuition when I was younger instead of listening to other people try to tell me what I should think and what I should do. I think your gut or your intuition and your heart knows more about who you are, what you need to be doing than anybody else. And never, ever let anybody tell you that you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think it's really funny. I remember back when I was probably 20 years old and I was writing poetry and I had the guts to, I guess, or if you call it that, or the bravery to send my poem off to a published playwright and ask I know, was that gutsy or what? And asked him to look it over and see what he thought. Well, he put red ink all over that thing. which, by the way, told me he actually read it.
Yeah, exactly.
And he sent it back to me. And he told me, you're too young to have enough experience to write poems that have any meaning,
Wow.
that have any richness or depth to them. Well, I took offense to that being 20 years old.
Yeah.
But I think that's what also gave me some feeling for a lot of these young girls that I have mentored over the years. And about 4 or 5 years ago, there were 2 or 3 young ladies that I was mentoring, and I helped them do a poetry book that we got into the hands of the United Nations. Thank you very much.
Wow.
And I had them start out by meeting a Pulitzer Prize nominated poet who talked to them about poetry before we got into actually doing it. But yeah, I mean, the funny thing is you just never know what that will do for you. But at the same time, what it did for me, actually, hearing from that guy, and I remember it so well, was I'm going to prove you wrong. I mean, granted, I do know I was young, but it didn't scar me for life. I kept writing poems. I mean, it was no big deal. But at the time, it just like broke my heart because he was trying to tell me I was never going to amount to anything. But, I do know now, hey, he took the time to look at it, read it, give me some feedback and, redline it all over the place. But, I think intuition tells you you're good enough and that you should always listen to your own heart, no matter what anybody else tells you. And intuition will tell you when to walk away, when to stop, and when to seek peace instead of moving forward. I've had to do that a lot in the last 6 months to a year. And, not even look back and is it really worthwhile moving forward in one direction when it's not worth the effort to move? I mean, seek peace first.
Yeah.
Always. And use your intuition to guide you in those things. I think decisions are really well made when you kind of look inside first anyway.
You shared a few things there that actually brought a few different situations, to my mind. Or the one thing that I have seen recently is more and more, particularly very senior men, are beginning to recognize that there is something to intuition. And there's actually quite a lot of science, around that. There's also actually an enormous amount of science that actually shows us the way that we think our brain works in respect to our nervous system as opposed to the other way around. And so, it's almost like if we talk about it, we start to then give people permission, and particularly men, who have actually over the years been told that that is actually, and I really don't like the terminology woo-woo because it's very dismissive. And yet history and ancient cultures have actually shown us and survived with all of that sort of wisdom for centuries, So you said something about don't let other people actually tell you, what you do or don't know. It is so important. I think even in situations where I've actually mentored or facilitated, I often say to people, I may be sharing information with you, the knowledge that I have, but that's not to actually tell you what to do. What's important is for you to look inward, because you know what to do, and trust that, right?
You've got to just be quiet enough to be able to let it come to you. Yeah, trust yourself.
Well, you think about the way that, business and culture actually works. That's not encouraged to slow down. It's actually about, if I look at lawyers, it's like 6-minute intervals. You've got to actually justify what you've done every 6 minutes, right? So there's no slowing down.
No.
So doing that and having the conversations, or us actually creating the opportunities to genuinely just sit with what is it that we've just heard and what's actually going on for us, gives rise to the opportunity for us to better understand who we are and make different choices.
Yeah.
So, Mary, if I was to actually ask you, are there any tips that you actually would share, particularly, you've recognised that young people is a real focal point for you. What is one tip that you would share with them in respect to, I guess, better understanding themselves, being more aware and conscious about who they are? What would you say?
Be fearless. That's one thing that I notice about what the youth that I tend to attract is there's a fearless quality about them that's very childlike. And even though some of them are quite, young, I think Namar, we talk about her because she's 19 years old, but I see sort of a fearlessness in her that I really appreciate, that I think, goodness, you're able to do some things I wouldn't even dream of doing at 19 years old. And then I look back and I think, well, shoot, I was your age when I was working with the governor.
Yes, hello.
So apparently I did. And then I just told you, I was gutsy enough to, actually send a poem off to this playwright, So I think there's something to be said for putting yourself out there and being a little fearless and not worrying about how you're being taken. Oh. If my husband can get Namar to eat some oysters the night before she's getting ready to fly back to Chicago, then, and she'll do it. I think there's fearlessness there. But I look at some of these other people. I mean, a couple of them are diaspora that just literally left their countries and came here on not a whim, but clearly a plan, but still, just to come find a way to live that's better, hopefully, than where they left behind, and try to find their way here. And, others are trying to figure out how to, start nonprofits.
Yeah.
Probably hardly a penny or a dime between them, to try to figure out how to get things rolling. So I think that, still others are navigating the waters of, entrepreneurship proper.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but they're doing it. And, they're doing it with some real gusto. And I really appreciate that. I have one that contacted me yesterday trying to find her way through commercialization on something. And I think, my goodness, you are really gutsy about that. And she's in a country that makes it even harder to do. So I say, be fearless. Find that fearlessness in yourself.
Yeah, it's almost like backing yourself, isn't it? Back yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're aware that I actually, have spent the last 11 years doing some work out of Tanzania. And over the last year, there's actually these two young girls that I have been mentoring in writing a book. So when you were talking about that poetry piece, you reminded me. When I met them and they shared this aspiration, of them wanting to actually be authors, I think it was in October not last year, but the year before. And so I said to them, okay, what have you written? And at that stage, they had written 4 pages. And I said to them, why are you writing? And they said, there are so many things that are really important to us in where we live, but we don't talk about it. And we really need to start talking about it. And to me, that was, now you've got my attention.
Wow.
And
That's big.
Massive. And I said to them, what's your book about? And they said, well, we've got 2. And I said, all right. The first one was actually about a young girl who wants to bleach her skin. And I said to her, tell me about that. And, she said to me, everybody just wants to be light-skinned. And, everybody here in Tanzania. And I said, well, actually, it's not just in Tanzania. I've worked in the Philippines, I've worked in Vietnam. I actually see that back at home in Australia. This is actually a global issue. And they just looked at me, really surprised that it was beyond their actual...
Beyond their area.
In a circle, yeah. And then what do you want to do with a book? Because it's not just about the book. And that moment of pausing, and this, went over a long period of time. It was weeks and months. And I said to them, when we are so passionate about, the stories that we actually want to share, and there is deeper meaning, there is a lot more that you can do than write a book. You can make that book a movement. So I'm going to share with you, Mary, that book is just about finished. The cover's just been done. They will actually see it in a few weeks' time.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
I've got goosebumps.
Oh, it is an extraordinary, story. I was actually meeting with them every week. We were doing edits. I'd send them back, getting them to think deeper, to think about what is it that she's actually feeling? What's the relationship with the people that she's interacting with? Can I just tell you, this is actually a mini movie. The impact that it will have is enormous. So, when you say that you give agency to 1 or 15 people, this is the type of movement that I actually look at, that we have the ability to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm on your journey, I'm on your path, but I've committed to, I want to change 1 billion lives. And it's not just us individually. And yes, it is scary because it's bigger than us. But the reality is my relationship with you then actually expands. Think about all the other people that we can actually ask to be more conscious.
That's right. Through all of us.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
those we touch, and then those that they touch. And that's what I see. And honestly, because I know now that I've been doing it for most of my life, who knows?
Yeah.
How many? I mean, I've been reconnected now with a young gal from my church that was in she's a graduate of one of my youth leadership programs. She's been married. She's got 2 kids now. And I'm like, our brother was in my program. He's my dentist. And I'm thinking, good Lord, I have been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how many that maybe have been impacted over the years. So yeah, we have. We've been doing it.
Oh, absolutely. Living the life. And it's all been with joy, right?
That's right.
So, Mary, sadly, we're going to have to actually wrap up. But there is one thing that if I can ask you, for those people who will be listening to this particular podcast, What's one thing that you would want them to take away?
Find one thing that bothers you from this past year that you can look at differently, that you can change the perspective on. Try to change the perspective. You may not hold on to that change of perspective, but change it temporarily and just see how it feels. Just see how it feels. You might surprise yourself.
So, to all of you who are actually listening to this, discussion, chat, conversation with Mary and I, here's the simple question that Mary is actually asking you. Think about that one thing that actually didn't quite sit right for you and ask yourself, what else? What else is possible? Mary, as I knew, it is a delight to actually have you on Let's Pay Attention, Hacking Consciousness. And I actually look forward to what we're actually going to do the year ahead, a lifetime ahead together. But thank you for being on this actual podcast with me.
Thank you, Kathy.
This was Let's Pay Attention, Hacking Consciousness. Stay awake, lead with heart, be bold enough to listen deeply. I'm Kathy DeMarcos. Until next time, be the impact.